In this video, I want to talk about learning to love who you are as a baseball player and using your unique skill set that you bring to go as far as you can in the game. Way too many players today are looking at guys like Ohtani or Aaron Judge or Paul Skeens and thinking the game is 100% about velocity and then just trying to copy that version of baseball. It would be the same thing as if we had a bunch of guys learning to play basketball and they all tried to copy the style of Shaq and Yao Ming, and yet almost none of us are going to end up being over 7 feet tall. We're better off looking at guys like Allen Iverson, for example, or Ray Allen, trying to copy what they're doing, learning from them. And then if you happen to be 7 feet tall and you developed all those skills, it would only help you much more. And so the same thing is true with pitching, with anything else in baseball. If I learned to pitch like Greg Maddux at a young age, and then I happen to be throwing 100 miles an hour, isn't that going to make me way better? Of course it is. But what we see is the opposite. We see 9, 10, 11-year-old kids trying to pitch like they're Aroldis Chapman, throwing every single pitch at max effort, thinking that's the only way to pitch because they see guys like that on TV. And yes, if you throw 100, 105 miles an hour, maybe trying to throw max effort up in the zone fastballs every time is your best bet. I'm not denying that 100, 105 miles an hour works. It clearly does. But there are also guys that are pitching in the mid 80s and having success. Look at Kyle Hendricks, for example. There's guys that learn the knuckleball and have tremendous success throwing even slower than that. Tim Wakefield pitched his fastball in the low mid 70s towards the end of his career. So what you want to do is look at what skill set do you have and how can I maximize that to get as far in baseball as you possibly can. So for most of you guys, 99% watching, you're not going to be 6'4", 6'5". You're not going to be throwing 95 to 100 despite everything you possibly try. But what you could do is you could maximize your command. You can get way better at command than you think if you actually focus on that. You can get way better at changing speeds, moving the ball around than you think if you actually focus on that. And because this is such a rare thing that people do, you're actually going to have an insane advantage over most pitchers that are just trying to throw as hard as they can, and they end up walking tons of guys. They end up having an insane amount of injuries, and it's really depressing for them, honestly. I know so many guys like this. I mean, think about it. I played from a young age. I was, good at a national level when I was 12 years old. I played high school, college, professionally, and I could tell you exactly which guys made it, how far, which guys burned out. I'll give you an example. Kyle Hendricks went to my high school. He wasn't the top guy of all time growing up. He was just a pretty average pitcher, but he just hit his spots. He knew who he was, and he leaned into who he was, and he loved that. And then he went to high school, did pretty good. And my high school coach saw how he pitched just with his brain, with understanding his strengths and weaknesses, and just trying to get hitters out. And he predicted he would be a big leaguer. I thought that was very fascinating because wouldn't you think that people are just going to look at, oh, he's 6'5" and he throws X velocity, therefore he's going to be a big leaguer. But from my high school, the best was actually Kyle Hendricks. So think about how fascinating that is. But my coach was really good, knew the game really well, understood that, and made that prediction. And unfortunately, there's a lot of people that don't understand baseball that are coaching that have a hard time seeing that. And so they will go for, guys that are throwing harder. But think about it from your own perspective, because your goal is not to make the 12-year-old, championship team or whatever. Your goal is to be the best pitcher you can be when you're 17, 18, play in college, play professionally. So if you're maximizing your chance of success at 12U by trying to be a pitcher that's not truly you, then you're actually hindering your probability of success because you're going to have a damaged arm. You're not going to learn to pitch properly. And as you get older, you're not going to develop the skills that are unique to you that make you stand out. And think about also the coach of the 12-year-old team. He's not a bad person for wanting to win games at 12U. Of course, he shouldn't be overusing pitchers, but it's his, honestly, his responsibility to pitch the best guys at that age. And for some guys, maybe they hit puberty earlier, they're throwing harder or whatever. Don't get caught up in the FOMO of that. Know who you are as a pitcher and have a game plan and enjoy the entire process of it. There's nothing wrong with being a reliever at 12. There's nothing wrong with being the third guy on the rotation at 12 or at 14 or 15 for that matter. Paul Skeens was, at the beginning of his high school career, just an average guy. No one would have thought he was going to be anything special. Ben Joyce talks about throwing 65 his freshman year of high school. No one would have thought that would be anything special. And then they develop. Like I said, Kyle Hendricks, same thing, totally average. There's probably more guys that were, more just normal at a young age than there is the opposite. At least that was absolutely my experience growing up. There are more guys that were just oversized and good at 12 that didn't make it than there were guys that were oversized and good in 12 that did make it. So it's not necessarily, your goal to be the best young pitcher. Your goal is to understand who you are. Am I a guy that's going to be 6'5"? Am I a guy that's going to, probably be throwing 100? First of all, you might have a decent idea of how tall you're going to get, but you don't really know how hard you're going to throw. But if you learn to pitch like Greg Maddux, you learn a knuckleball, you learn a changeup, you learn to have good mechanics, regardless of your final velocity, that's going to help you tremendously. So that's what you should be focusing on if you have your own best self-interest in mind versus just trying to win a 12-year-old championship. So if you have your own best self-interest in mind, trying to make it as far as possible, you learn to pitch like Greg Maddux. Maybe you end up throwing 88 when you're older and you can play good Division I, maybe pro ball, maybe you can make the big leagues. But let's say you learn to pitch like Greg Maddux and you're throwing 98 when you're older. Then all of a sudden, you're a George Kirby. You're one of the top guys in baseball or even better. So there's absolutely no drawback to having a game plan, understanding who you are, and leaning in and loving who you are as a pitcher, because you're not going to be somebody else. So you may as well love the way you play the game, your style of the game, and pitch with a long-term focus in mind so you're not hurting your arm. You're learning a changeup, you're learning a knuckleball, you're having this kind of long-term focus of, I want to get to the highest level that I can, and I want to lean into who I am and love who I am, control the controllables, work hard, keep my head down and focus on that goal versus obsessing over where you are at, 10 to even 15 years old. Don't worry about that. Work hard, love who you are, be the best version of yourself, and I guarantee you'll make it further than you think.